What's up, gamers? This is Steven Rodriguez and Chad McKittrick from Team Kitchen Fable, and we're going to be talking about the Las Vegas recap for Chad's deck here.
So yes, I was at Vegas in the calling main event. This is the deck that I played. I ended up 19th, and we can go through a little more detail, kind of how the deck performed, what the overall tournament was like, and some of the deck decisions.
Yeah, for sure. That's what we want to go into right now. So real quick, I just wanted to ask about day one. Day one, you went 7-0, right?
I did not, unfortunately.
Ooh,
I went 6-1.
6-1.
My
Pretty
my
good.
round three loss was a tough one. Just very largely due to variance. And obviously, my opponent did not make any misplays, but it was a chain mirror,
Hmm.
and it was just who drew best. And he got to play all three of his Art of Wars. He banished a blood deck card every single turn except once, and they were even like really well split between seeds and attacks. And I was having slightly below average draws. So that one just, Sean's already said it in one of the previous videos that we recorded recently. Like, any big tournament like that, you're going to lose to variance once. Your deck's not going to perform for you, and you have to win anyway once.
Yep,
And, that's just the way it goes.
yep, for sure.
So that one was a pretty solid thrashing, I would say. But otherwise, I felt the deck performed quite well. I started the day with a Prism matchup.
Hmm.
Also a very, very strange game. So, like, Prism is one of the ones in the New York meta where I've been playing leading up to the calling. Has been a bit of a trouble spot for me. The aggro Prism approach out here, along with the exact configuration of leaving, like, a single Genesis and leaving the library in. And between those two cards, I swear they always have it when I'm playing a Road to Nationals. In the first three turns, I should say.
Yeah.
So yeah, very different game plan played out with this Prism matchup, but also very strange because they were able to play, I believe it was 5 total Herald of Eruditions during the game. Because turn 1, she opened up with a Herald of Erudition into a Herald of Erudition, and the next turn was a Herald into I'm blanking on the name. The Herald that puts a
Rebirth?
card from
Yeah,
graveyard on top. Yeah, Rebirth.
Rebirth. I got you.
That I just had to let through, and like things kind of snowballed from there. But I was able to pick the tempo up around Soul Shackle 3 and close it up from there.
All right. And then other than that loss you had and that Prism matchup, were there any other tough opponents during your day one?
Yeah, I had 3 other chain mirrors, and I played a Bravo and a Katsu. The Katsu matchup was very, very good, very close. That was the second to last round, day one, against a very good opponent. And as we can get into more detail as we go through a bit more of the deck, I tend to always board Katsu as though it's a more mid-range control deck, and based on gameplay, adjust what I'm doing if they are in fact aggro, which is what it turned out to be. And thankfully, my deck performed the way that it had in some of my testing, where it's always a very, very close game, but I am usually able to eke it out.
Nice. Nice. Well, that's very good.
Um,
So,
and
yeah.
in the previous video with Sean and Louie, that we did a pretty good discussion on the very, very distinct chain deck that I played at the last round, day one. And again, I did win that one, but it was a very close, very interesting game.
Nice, nice. Yeah, we'll touch upon day two matches in a little bit here, but this is a good segue a little bit to the deck. And let's start off with the equipment here. You'd run a pretty lean, just one pretty much in each slot, except right here in the chess piece. Why don't you talk about this choice right here and where it goes?
Yeah, so actually, one of the places where the Iron Weave shines, in my experience, is the Katsu matchup. Using it for a free turn to effectively blank mask early on when you're building up to Soul Shackle 3-4 range where you can really, hit the gas. But also part of the plan with this deck is to be hitting the gas on sometimes even turn 2, but pretty consistently on 3. So you just need that little extra bit, and then it turns into the free resources you need to go that little bit over the top to, cinch the win towards the end. And so it's in that Katsu matchup. I pretty much always board it in, and Dash is another matchup where it proves very useful because Dash is another deck that really can give a go at racing Chane pretty well, and being able to get those free resources to get an extra attack or two in is massive.
That's
And
awesome.
since they're shooting you with pistols,
Yeah.
huge block is not going to do a whole lot.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. No, that's a great thing. So now that we've talked
Other
about,
than that, yeah, the last thing I
oh
would
yeah,
say is
sure.
ebb and fold. I've consistently gone back and forth on trying to make room for ebb and fold as
Oh,
well. Again, primarily the mirrors, where I feel like it
mhm.
would be great, but it's a very strong, nice to have against unexpected Kano in early rounds of CC, or a really really good Kano player that's able to make it in the top 64, like we saw.
Yeah, we did see, and I guess you didn't play any Kanos because
I did not. I
okay,
went with the I'm gonna race and possibly get beaten if it happens, but I'd rather tailor my deck to be better against what I expected to be more common. So
that makes
just
sense.
a bit of a meta call.
That makes sense. Good call. I think it was a good call. So that's a good segue into the main deck. So we're not going to talk about this right now, but let's go ahead and talk about your choices as to use. So this is like you always bring these to every matchup, no matter what, right?
Yeah. So the way I think of the deck, it is a 61 card main deck. I could never find that last one to cut out. I really felt like it was working well enough that I didn't want to tinker with it beyond that. So it's not a perfectly smooth 60, but it is 61. And then based on matchup, I move in or take out or both, depending on the matchup, because some I run more cards, and 61 is kind of the standard otherwise. Um,
Excellent.
the overall theory as I think of it with the deck, because I honestly think with all Flesh and Blood decks, there's the theory of deck building that went into it to put it together, but there's also a partner theory of how you play with that deck, and anyone just having a list and not the other piece is going to have a very different result. Because you can play the same deck in a lot of different ways, I feel, commonly across Flesh and Blood decks, especially in CC where you get to do sideboarding decisions. But my default theory of the deck is I want to be attacking 3 times off a blue pitch each turn.
Nice. Oh, that makes total
That's
sense.
that's the absolute core nutshell. Part of how my deck is skewed towards that goal is really minimizing anything that is not 1 and 0 cost. So in the true main deck, all I have are the 2 Howls, not 3, and 2 CNC, not 3.
Yep, I do see that right here. And speaking of two ofs of certain cards, why don't you talk about your two of choices in your make deck a little bit? Because I'm a little interested. Usually people play, for example, 9 Rift Binds. They don't cut this much down, but like I want to hear what your insight is on these decisions.
Yeah, so some of it is down to color balancing. One of the later tweaks I made to the deck was to slightly lower the blue count from where I had typically been having it, and it just sped things up and made things a little more consistent in terms of not having a what I would call like a hobble turn, where you have like here's a good attack followed by a riftbind for 1 or
Yeah.
a bounding blue for 2 kind of thing. Um, so some of it comes down to color due to that, which is where some of the blue twos come from. But so blue flock, as you say, I don't run red flock, and
Hmm.
I'm down to 2. I had been running 3. That was one of the blues that I was able to shave off. I've found in my list, which is again not a typical flock list, not running the reds, I found on average that when I'm able to make the Quicken token, it is 50% or a little bit less that I'm able to make meaningful use of the Quicken on the following turn. Between needing to block because of the timing of when I could create it, and I need to just hold that last blue and pray for the last damage because it's towards the end game. Whatever the case may be, it just on average, it really felt like it was a somewhat below 50% max kind of thing. So for that reason, I felt like it was not doing a huge amount, and I never want to see 2 in a game. So it felt much better bringing that down to 1. or sorry, down to 2,
Down to 2, yeah.
removing the one that I had as the third. Vexing Malice is kind of my you fill up as many blues as you need, and that's kind of the last one on the list that made it in. So there's only 2 instead of all 3 of that, because it's, in my experience with this deck, it's very, very rare that I've been looking to use that card for the one on top of a null rune kill kind of scenario.
Yeah.
It just, this gameplay, the gameplay that I take with this deck usually does not end in that kind of a scenario. And really, as all Chane players at this point have seen and know, I'm sure, the Invert Existence really kind of usurps that use case largely.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And then, like, we have some only 2 howls as well.
Yep, and that is a concession to the resource cost of the card. I love the effect, but all 3 got a bit clunky in various ways, including the first Road to Nationals I played in, where on Soul Shackle 4 I banished all 3 red howls.
Oof. Yeah, not fun.
Yeah. So yeah, it felt overall like consistency was going up when I was only running 2 instead of 3. And it does go against that core idea of I want to really guarantee an ability to pitch a blue and play 3 things.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to say specifically about the main deck?
The other piece we didn't cover, the 2 blue Riftbind.
Oh yes, right here.
So I have heard from I forget exactly which source. I believe it ultimately goes back to Dante, but a discussion around blue blood deck cards really just not ever being worth it. And generally, from my own experience diving into Chane and brewing around various decks, I tend to agree. The 2 blue Riftbind, to me, are the exception in this deck. The Riftbind effect is just supported enough to justify the blue ones.
Yeah.
Because a red Nimblism followed by a blue Riftbind is still an attack for 5. And that's 5 for 1, pretty solid. Yep. And enables a Nebula Blade in between.
Yep, all for the 1 blue cost, or 1 blue pitch, which is fantastic. What you pretty much what you want to be doing.
Exactly, and same thing with like the red Plunder Run, etc. So howls too. So there's plenty of ways to make those still a meaningful enough attack that I found it worth it. And especially having, again, 2, not the full 3, because ideally you pitch one of those early, and that becomes your second or third attack on the final turn, where you get double value out of Riftbind, red into blue or red, yellow, blue, etc.
Yep. And I know, because I feel like we do need to just touch up on them a little bit. Why don't you just give an insight on how you feel about Nimblism and Tremor of Irathiel?
So, I know that the community is quite vocal in opinion on these cards. My personal opinion, they overperformed the weekend. I really can't say otherwise. Nimblism is a free 4+ attack on a Riftbind, and I run 8 of them. You're gonna be pairing that with Riftbind pretty often, and until Tails, there were no +4 cards like this. And the power level being slightly upped, it seems, with some of the non-attack action boost that's being put behind the talent system.
Yeah.
Like, this is outside of that, and it still works as a +4 for Chane. So I think that's pretty huge. And again, 2 Tremor, not 3. If it's perfectly timed, you do want to see both of these in a game, but you never want to see 2 in the same hand.
Yeah.
So again, a justification for the 2, not 3. Also generic, wanting to make sure to manage those. But that card, I think, is one of the bigger mind game cards that I can play in Chane, because you sequence your turn and get the opponent into a fairly difficult spot where they're deciding how to block either your first or second attack, factoring in that you're going to be coming in for 4 more, because that's what Chane does. He attacks for X times per turn.
Yep.
And when you can come at them with a full 6, I feel like gives you maximum chance for an opponent to make ultimately a devastating blocking choice. Because if it's 4, I'll block 3, I'll take 1, that's fine, I can do what I want to do. Wait, I'm going to block 3 and take 3
Yeah,
does a lot of things to people's assessment of what they're going to be coming back with, and I've found people much more worried about taking that much life and blocking this card more because of it.
for sure.
And especially when it's paired with one of the boosts, be it Nimblism or Plunder Run or Howl, coming in for 9 as a second or third attack is just
A lot.
pretty ridiculous.
It's a lot.
I mean, it's flying kick plus some.
Flying hip. Yeah, you got that right. And then before we move on to the sideboard, I know that you mentioned earlier you wanted to talk about how this list does not have E-Strike.
Yes, there is the notable exception of what is not here. So part of what I've heard is the common refrain for Tremor not being a good card in chain decks is that it's generic. So E-Strike falls under that same category. I personally found that really focusing on the single blue pitch, I can play 3 things game plan, Tremor is doing more work for me than E-Strike did. Because with E-Strike, you're bottoming a card that is, in a lot of ways, effectively the same as paying all 3 from a blue for the card. Yes, you can bottom a red or a yellow, etc., but like it's worth a whole card. Whereas with Blood Debt storing attacks up for you, pitching a single blue is 2 or 3 attacks, depending on if you have a Shadow Puppetry, Art of War, Quicken Token from Flock, etc. So to me, it just was doing more, and I'd rather have those fill my generic slots. In the just it needs to be a big attack mode, it's only 1 less. Yes, it is a breakpoint less, but it's I don't know. For me, it's worked very well. I have generally not missed E-Strike. I also think when you have E-Strike in chain, it can lead you to blocking decisions that end up not working out in the long run because you're much more willing to just block with these 2 cards and then crack back with an E-Strike.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times it probably will end up working out better if you just keep the cards if it's not actually going to kill you and try to overcome the game with tempo from there. Again, it depends on the turn and the timing and such, but the reduced overall resource cost of the deck I also feel like mitigates the lack of the draw a card option off of E-Strike to some degree. I've generally not run into that kind of issue. Variants will hit you sometimes. I did have all red hands occasionally, but I can play out all red hands fairly okay with this deck. And I never ran into the dreaded all red hand followed by all red hand scenario that knocked me out of Nationals in the calling run that I had. So there is a little bit of luck to doing that well in such a long tournament for sure, but. Anyway, all that going back to E-Strike, I didn't entirely miss it, and I really felt like the E-Strike turn from some of my chain opponents definitely felt like it was helping give me the edge in the game from the mid-game to late game.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. That pretty much covers everything here. We got the seeds, we got all the cards that everybody knows and loves. Like they're pretty standard. Everything else. So now let's move over to your sideboard and then like just your decisions on when to bring these cards in.
Yep, it's actually a fairly straightforward sideboard plan overall. The third Command and Conquer does come in a lot of matchups. It's really gonna stay in the sideboard if the arsenal is not going to be a major component of the game, which is not all that often. So, like, really, it might be okay to think of the deck as 62 and just keep that in the main deck the whole time and maybe take it out if you really need to cut back to a full 60 for a very specific kind of matchup. But aside from that card, it's basically Ninth Blades are specific to Prism, and that is partially due to my local metagame. I want both the yellow strip on that to be an extra boost to being able to deal with library, and the absolute guarantee of popping Phantasm rather than Command and Conquer having the occasional issue of going against the wrong herald.
Yeah.
So that's the Prism game plan. Basically, all of the yellows come in, and a lot of blues swap for yellows. So the overall yellow ratio is higher.
Cool. Yeah.
Aside from that, the rest of those cards. Well, actually, I guess the three invert come in for the Chane matchup, obviously, and I did go up to a full 3. Although throughout the entire calling, I don't believe I ever was using that card to kill a Chane, even though that's part of the sideboard plan.
Yeah. And you just bring them in. You don't take anything out.
No, for those I take out meet and greet blue. I basically swap them for blues.
Yeah.
It's meet and greet blues. I think one of the vexing, if I remember right. It's been a while since I looked at my notes at this point, but it's basically a blue for blue swap. The 2 blue Riftbinds are the other one.
Oh, perfect.
It's the 2 blue Riftbinds and a meet and greet that come out for invert, because the game's not going to go long enough that you're cycling a Riftbind for later and getting value out of it towards the end, kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
The Eclipse and Seeping Shadows are, along with the Dimensional Crossroads, are for the control matchups. And obviously that part of the deck is going to have to drastically change with recent news. But, Bravo is one that those come in, and I feel like the Bravo matchup has always been the most decided by the luck of knowing what you're up against and how you board. Because like I said earlier, Katsu, I've found success in always boarding for control and just powering through it as aggro. Whereas Bravo, I strongly have felt like if you board for aggro Bravo, you have a chance. If you board for mid-range control Bravo, you have a chance. If you guess right. If you guess wrong, you've already lost. Because, if they start defending out and you don't have Eclipse, good luck. So that one has always been a bit of an interesting matchup. I got fairly lucky again in terms of only facing a single Bravo, and that one I guess more mid-range control and was correct in the calling. And that one usually does come down to either early Dimensional Crossroads or a mid to late game Eclipse. Sometimes you really have to play around the timing of when you can do the Eclipse. Because if you do it a turn too early, where they can still just soak everything you give, Ursa's gone.
Yeah.
Because all they have to do is, they can still block with 2, keep 2, and knock them with Thanatos.
Yeah, just do it.
So you got to play that one pretty careful. But the Exude Confidence is the other tech for the control matchup. If it's not kind of obvious from the things that I'm playing around with already, I tend to be a pretty open-minded brewer. I don't mind trying out jank and seeing if it works. So the way I came to Exude was actually the first thing I was playing around with when Chane came out was pairing it with Captain's Call. And that led me to liking the idea of having a reasonable number of zero-cost generic attacks for value. I was trying a bunch of them out, and actually Coax the Commotion was the first one that I was like, holy crap, this actually does stuff. Flock is definitely a more safe and consistent option for that effect, but it being free and being able to be done at the very end of an attack chain is still mildly interesting to me. Because, Art of War, you can attack 3 times, you have a card in Arsenal, and you just coax at the end. Okay, you both get Quicken tokens, all they're doing is drawing up, you get to have the similar flock effect for the next turn on top of a free attack. So it does similar but different things. It is definitely way more risky. It's not a absolute top tier card, but it was fun to play with.
Unfortunate. Wish we could have seen more of it.
After that one, I moved on and realized some of the things that Exude can really do if you sequence Chane well. And that is, you need to give Exude go again, either through a Quicken token, Art of War, Shadow Puppetry, etc. Or you can even pop your Snapdragon Scalers for this purpose. but you basically play it after having already activated Chane. So you do all of your non-attack actions, you activate Chane,
Yep.
you do whatever to give Go Again to Exude, then Exude can have a full 3 or more, depending on what else you have. If you don't need to use scalers, you might be able to get a full 4 chain link chain, fully protected from defense reactions. Hard to pull off against Bravo, but any other control matchup that can lead to turns where you can kill like a defensive Katsu from like 20 life out of nowhere.
Nice.
Because they're just sitting there with Flick Flack and Arsenal and a couple of Flick Flacks in hand and just taking damage after damage after damage.
Yep. Can't do anything. All right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up. The pretty much everything that is the deck. So we've covered day one a little bit. So why don't you go ahead and talk about how you felt day two and what happened there?
So yeah, I mean, day 2 was my goal. I was doing as much work into the deck as I could, and that was kind of the only thing I was focused on. And actually being able to pull that off was pretty huge. So I did try to get as much sleep as I could, and be fresh and ready to play the next day. But it was a pretty early start. I believe it was like a full hour earlier than the event started on day 1, but. I go in, have just like half an hour to settle in from when I got there, and first round gets paired, and I'm up against Dorinthia in day 2, who was on the Axes build.
Ooh.
That game
Yeah.
was, I would say, a pretty average game for me. I had the 1-2 turn, have to just figure out how to stop as much damage while still presenting some and build up for that third Soul Shackle turn on average where I can really swing things. Managed to get tempo, was drawing average to better, and just was able to largely close that out. Obviously got lucky that, absolute kill cards were not in the top 25% of my opponent's deck. But that one was, I'd say, a fairly straightforward game, and was nice to start the day off with a win.
For sure. Get that boost. Get the morale boost for yourself.
Yeah, and the second pairing went up, and I ended up against Dorinthia again.
Wow.
And this time it was a Dawnblade Dorinthia. Actually, I would like to shout out Heath from Team Kitchen Fable, who I did some playtesting with. He had been working on a Dorinthia deck for quite a while and was looking for chain practice. We played, I think, 3 or 4 games even, within a week of the calling, I think it was, and I absolutely needed every single one of those reps. When we were playing, Heath was able to just eke out the win every single time, and it was informative to see how that gameplay really goes out, because I had not seen Dorinthia anywhere for quite a while. And I would say the things that I picked up and kind of bringing back the memory of being able to play against Dorinthia heavily from the skirmish season kind of put that a little more fresh in my mind as well. All that together barely gave me the ability to win that game.
Wow.
It came down to a very interesting game state where there were like 5 turns, I want to say, of me all out attacking, him defending up and having to just tick down 2 damage each turn, one off one attack, one off the other, and still crack back with enough to make me block. And it was just like, it was like the exact same things happening over and over. And there were a couple of times in that process where it felt like, well, maybe I can high roll this and just kill him here, but it's not guaranteed. And it was between that playtesting practice with Heath and the exercise that our pod leader Sean put me on to play Katsu for 2 weeks straight when I was kind of plateauing in my skill set. Honestly, that game felt a lot like a Katsu game, at least the end game of it, even though I was playing Chane and he was playing Dory. You have to eke every little bit out and be as patient as the game requires for you to get a guaranteed win rather than roll the dice and possibly lose. And all of that added together kind of gave me the tools I needed to be able to pull off that patience and being able to pull out the game from there.
Yeah, just classic Flesh and Blood, just like
Yeah,
mechanics or just the casual blocking, like the Welcome to Wrath days, where like it was just more
yep.
about making sure that you do this blocks exactly like you need them to do, and you'll just win the game.
Yeah, I have one extra left over from last turn, so I'm gonna overblock this one for 9 because the chance he has the route, that kind of stuff, really adds up. But when you're able to keep a blue, you get a lot of banishes, so you're gonna come out and know you're gonna have some save for the following turn. Like I was able to really pace my blocking decisions based off of that.
Nice, very very good. Any other notable matches in day two, or
I guess the only other one, to be as transparent as I can, the third game of day 2, I absolutely lost myself that game. And it's a very strong lesson in tournament preparation and experience overall. So my own personal experience is that I've played Legacy format of Magic for like the last 6 years.
Mhm.
6 years from when COVID started, because I didn't really play since COVID. Um, but there it was always just, like local stores, 20 to 50, sometimes 60, 70 people tournaments, I'd get close to, but usually not in top 8 kind of stuff. But they're all just, 4, 5, 6, 7 max rounds, 1-day affairs. So this was my first real back-to-back tournament playing both days. And mental fatigue, I think, just really
Oof.
finally came and got me. So in this game, it was a Chane mirror, and I was drawing probably one of my hottest games of the tournament. I was really getting everything I needed. I was very far ahead, and had a go off Art of War turn where I played the Art of War based on game state and what I had. The +1 was definitely the direction I wanted it to go,
Mhm.
and drew the cards, then mapped out the whole turn, and it ended up that I was going to be able to attack 4 total times in that turn, and there were a lot of interesting decisions around which order to do things to try to get the suboptimal blocking out of my opponent as much as possible.
Yep.
So I spent a little bit, really thought through the whole line, and the line finished with playing a Red Howl from Banish into an Arsenaled CNC as the final attack.
Mm.
And for whatever reason, from finishing that whole thought, planning out my entire line, I go ahead and say, okay, here we go, and activate Chane, or sorry, not activate Chane, play the Howl, then activate Chane, then play the CNC.
Ha.
Brain just jumped right to the end for whatever reason.
Oof. Ah, I see. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh no.
and I realize it right as I do it, and I can't even rescue it with the scalers because CNC costs 2, so like occasionally you run into those problems and you can sort of rescue it with a scalers because you forgot to activate Chane as a standard example. But yeah, there was just no fixing that mistake. It was still a CNC for 9, but it let him keep enough, and that game, like I said, I was really far ahead at that point going into it. The game came down to a 1 life to 1 life scenario, and on my final turn, I banished a yellow seeds and did not have a 0 cost attack. So if it was any other color, still would have been able to pull it out, but I killed myself to blood debt instead.
Yikes. Ah, well. Yeah,
And that
pretty good
was
lesson, for
round
sure.
3 of day 2. If I had won that game, had a probably solid chance. All I had to do was win the next one, and I would have made top 8. But I'm still very, very happy with 19th,
Oh yeah,
and it's
you did great,
a
dude.
lifelong lesson to learn from, and know that as I get more experience, I'll be able to power through those final rounds.
All right. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I feel like the more we gain experience, the more we get adjusted to the tournament grind. I know for my experience, I did not make day 2, but I really did feel at the end of day 1 like I was just like destroyed. I had never done such a big tournament ever.
Yep.
Like I was just a lowly Pokemon player, and it is fun, but I haven't done like a big Pokemon or anything tournament where I just spent like that much time playing on the card game. So with that, it's different, definitely a different beast to come to. And
It
if you're not
is,
used
and
to it.
like I've played all day before. Like I've gone to a few of the earlier Magic Grand Prix and stuff, and like okay, you play the morning 4 round daily double thing, and like afternoon, etc. So like I've played that much of a game in the same day, but like doing it that way versus the main event of a tournament and really grinding it out where each round is getting harder and harder against better people
It
is
was,
a very different beast.
it was something else. All right. Whew. Well, that pretty much covers the day one, day two, unless you have anything to add to that.
No, I
And
think that pretty well does. Well, actually, the last thing that I will say is I'll give a shout out to Zachary Burrell. He was my opponent on the last round after I punted that third game, and he and I had a chain mirror that was one of the most balanced games of my tournament, I would say. It was very close the whole way through. We were both jockeying as much as we could. It was a very, and I know chain mirrors are, Bitcoin flippy at their core no matter what, but like it really felt like a real game for both of us. And he managed to just eke it out. And we were talking after the round when he got when he won. I was saying, based on timing of my loss, round 3, and then the prior round, that even if I won that last round, my guess is I probably would have ended up like 10th to 12th range.
mm,
But his record, it was I think around 4 or 5 was his first loss, and otherwise the same. And with that win, he managed to sneak in as number 8.
nice.
So kudos to him on beating me and actually pulling off bubbling in.
Sweet, sweet. All right. Now, I know that we prepared this a little bit, so now that we have all this chain and it's quite a bit of time after the calling, and we've some things changed a little bit as everybody has heard, Seeds of Agony has been banned. So where do we go from here? Where does a chain build? Are you gonna stick on chain? Do you think?
I'm looking to definitely toy around with it to see, but my curiosity at the moment is mostly whether or not I can salvage a playable deck by adjusting what I currently have. If it turns out to need to be a full rebuild, we'll see. At some point, I'm sure I will because I actually really do enjoy the chain gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of moving pieces, intricate sequencing, and things like that. Just is a gameplay style I like. Probably why I started with Azalea in this game.
Ah, fellow Azalea player
So
for sure.
yeah, so I'll definitely have Chain on and off my mind going forward, no matter what. But first and foremost, I'm curious if this general idea of play Chain and be able to attack 3 times off a single blue in a turn will still be viable.
Mm.
So
Be a little harder, yeah, for sure.
yeah, it's definitely going to be harder, but I'm like looking to maybe merge some of my old brewing ideas with some of the new things that are coming out. So my thoughts of the first thing I will try for this list is you're gonna, no matter what I think, be taking a hit on blood debt ratios in chain decks. Because there just are not other viable options to replace those. And good luck to anyone running a 9 Seeping Shadows list. If you make it work,
Yeah, yeah.
good on ya. But you've got that as a 3 cost, you've got Howl at a 2 cost, and you've got Tome of Torment as the other 0 cost. And that's it.
Yep.
Like, those are the only blood debt options that aren't attacks, and if you just replace 9 non-attack cards with attacks, then it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than that, any consideration on what to add? Maybe any cars that really just come off the top of your head that you want to like test out real quick for the chain build?
Yeah, I think the configuration I'm looking to start with is keep all of them to be non-attack cards, and try to keep some of them as blood debt to help that ratio as much as you can without making it really bad by adding like blue attacks or something. So what I'm thinking is I'll up it to the 3rd Howl. That card is very good and is probably the most likely additional card I'd be fine adding that costs more than 1. So I will add the 3rd one in there, and I will try 2 Tome of Torment to replace the other 2 red seeds.
All right. Well, yeah, it's a good starting point for sure.
Yeah, so like the red ones get to keep being blood debt and non-attack, and it's pretty reasonable to replace those. They do different things still, but it seems like it might work out. The next thing I'm going to try is in the yellow slot, going back and trying the yellow Captain's Calls.
Mm.
Because those are +3 to a Rift Bind, which is pretty fine for a 0 cost, and they can give additional Go Again, which is something that I feel like will definitely be a bit more needed if I'm adding things like Tome of Torment, where I'm taking an action and not even attacking.
Yeah, Chane might like go again, so 1 or 2 times here. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's definitely possible to have too many Go Again. That
yeah,
is where I started, and I wanted to roll it back to find a good balance, but I do think there's enough reasons to bring those back in if I'm not playing the Yellow Seeds.
yeah. Personally,
And
I'm a big
then,
fan of multicolored Malvern skies.
yeah, I
Not
think
all of
the,
them,
the
but
blue is great, but there's, yeah, I like the non-conditional as far as my build goes, because it's Command and Conquer that it doesn't affect.
yep, for sure.
Well, and
And
Soul Reaping.
and
But
Ghostly Visit. I've had the issue and on Hollow, but like,
no, Yellow Captain's Call hits
oh
Ghostly
yeah,
Visit.
yellow Captain's Code for sure, for sure. I thought we were still on, yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah,
Malvern
yeah.
skies,
For
yeah,
Mauvert, yes, and those are the kinds of reasons not to. Yeah, never play Mauvert Skies and have a whole lot of attack actions in or in Banish, and just say, well, it doesn't matter, and play a Ghostly Visit,
yeah.
because that does not turn out well.
Nope. Yeah, I think I had one opponent had to do that against me.
I did that a while ago in my chain playing days, pre-calling.
Yeah, I feel like you do it once and then you never do it again. I think
Yep.
it's a hard lesson to learn. Uh, well, that's
So yeah, and then the blue slot, I am looking at
oh
the
yeah.
Sting of Sorcery.
Ooh, right. There's a nice new card, Sting of Sorcery.
It fills a number of the same slots. It's a 0 cost non-attack action that's blue.
Mm-hmm.
It follows the general theory that I like for blue cards, which is either they are non-blood dead attacks or they are cards that help in endgame or control kind of scenarios if you're playing them out. So with the Sting of Sorcery, that really also kind of helps with the lack of the little pings off the seeds, so that feels like a pretty solid switch as well. I wish it had Blood Debt, but that card would probably be ridiculous if it had Blood Debt. They've banned one that costs 0 already, so...
Yeah. Yeah. You're a dreamer for sure. Wishing it had Blood Dead. I think nobody else feels that way except you. Oh man. Okay. I think that pretty much wraps it up. If you want to have, unless you have one last final thing to say here.
And those are my immediate thoughts. Like I said, I'm fine trying out really crazy janky ideas. There's on the kitchen table server, the most recent Thursday Armory was Commoner Blitz, the first time we've done that. After that first night where I was just running my old Azalea Blitz deck stripped to commons and messed around with a little bit just to try something ridiculous. Since then, I've kind of been thinking in terms of, would there be a commoner Chane in a post-Seeds world as well as a place to play with ideas? And what came out of that was Overload as an interesting idea.
Nice.
Again, that 0 cost attack kind of pairing with Captain's Call side of things. That just seems like it might have a place almost, because you're gonna, like, Chane typically has trouble closing out those last few points of damage, and Seeds were one of the tools that you usually had to do that.
Yep.
And I feel like a surprise, like, okay, I can go down to 3 because I'm not gonna get pinged by Seeds anymore, and then just Nimblism, Overload, dead.
Yeah, yeah, almost. Yeah, pretty much. Especially, yeah, late game scenario, they have no armor, nothing. I'm sure that you can definitely
It
weave your
intrigues
deck.
me as a late game kill card,
Yeah.
but I do not expect it to truly turn out to be good. It's just
We can dream.
some of the things that I'm starting to think about, because there's a lot of knockoff effects of not having Seeds.
Yep.
And I think the how do you close out the game side of it, anything you can add in to give you more game there, the better.
Yep. Perfect. Awesome. Well, that I think wraps up our thing here. Yeah, I think we've talked enough. That's it. That's it. Thanks everyone for watching a great Team Kitchen Fable video. We'll see you next time, and hopefully I can come again and you know, be the main talker of the. I mean, Chad was main talker, but I can be like somebody that hosts. That's what I want to say. But yeah,